all our sports persons who have participated and won laurels in the recently concluded Commonwealth Games held at Glasgow. Friends, freedom is a celebration. Independence is a challenge. In the 68th year of freedom, we have reaffirmed the power of our individual and collective liberties by electing, through a remarkably peaceful electoral process, a stable government with a clear majority for a single party after 3 decades. The increase in voter turnout to 66% from the last election's 58% shows the vitality of our democracy. This achievement has given us an opportunity to take up the challenge of governance by reforming the policies, practices, and systems of governance so that the enormous aspirations of our people can be fulfilled with vision, commitment, integrity, speed, and administrative capability. Stagnant minds create immobile systems which become roadblocks to growth. India demands creative thinking in governance that enables fast-track development and ensures social harmony. The nation has to be placed above partisan impulses. The people come first. Friends, in a democracy, good governance is exercise of power for efficient and effective management of our economic and social resources for the well-being of the people. This power has to be exercised within the framework of the Constitution through the institutions of state. With the passage of time and changes in the ecosystem, distortions do appear, making some institutions dysfunctional. When one institution does not function in the manner expected of it, the phenomenon of overreach sets in. While some new institutions might become necessary, the real solution lies in reinventing and restoring the existing ones to serve the purpose of effective governance. Good governance is critically dependent on rule of law, participatory decision-making, transparency, responsiveness, accountability, equity, and inclusiveness. It calls for wider involvement of the civil society in the political process. It calls for deeper engagement of the youth with the institutions of democracy. It calls for quick dispensation of justice to the people. It calls for ethical and responsible behavior from the media. A country of our size, heterogeneity, and complexity calls for culture-specific governance models. It calls for cooperation in the exercise of power and assumption of responsibility by all stakeholders. It calls for constructive partnership between the state and the citizen. It calls for taking a responsive administration to the doorstep of every hut and habitation of the land. Fellow citizens, the decisive challenge of our times is to end the curse of poverty. The focus of our policies now has to be to move from alleviation of poverty to elimination of poverty. The difference is not mere semantics. Alleviation is a process. Elimination is a time-defined objective. In the last 6 decades, the poverty ratio has declined from over 60% to less than 30%. Even then, nearly 1/3 of our population still lives below the poverty line. Poverty is not a mere statistic. Poverty has a face which becomes unbearable when it scars the visage of a child. The poor cannot and will not wait for yet another generation to see the very essentials of life, food, shelter, education, and employment being denied to them. The benefits from economic development must percolate down to the poorest of the poor. In the last decade, our economy grew at an average rate of 7.6% per year. Though the growth rate was subdued at below 5% during the last 2 years, I sense renewed vigor and optimism in the air. Signs of revival are visible. Our external sector has strengthened. Fiscal consolidation measures are beginning to show results. Notwithstanding occasional spurts, inflation has started moderating. However, Food prices still remain a matter of serious concern. Record food grains production last year helped agriculture to grow at a healthy 4.7%. Employment has increased by an average of about 4% per year in the last decade. Manufacturing sector is on the rebound. The stage is now set for our economy to move on a high growth trajectory of 7 to 8%, which is essential to ensure the availability of adequate resources for equitable development. Fellow citizens, economy is the material part of development. Education is the essential part of it. A sound education system is the bedrock of an enlightened society. It is the bounden duty of our educational institutions to provide quality education and inculcate the core civilization values of love for the motherland, compassion for all, tolerance for pluralism, respect for women, performance of duty, honesty in life, self-restraint in conduct, responsibility in action, and discipline in young minds. By the end of the 12th five-year plan, we would have achieved a literacy rate of 80%. But would we be able to say that we have provided quality education and skills to our children to be good citizens and successful professionals? Fellow citizens, our thoughts are influenced by our environment. Yadrishi bhavna yasya siddhar bhavati tadrishi. It means whatever are one's thoughts, so will be the outcomes. Clean environment breeds clean thoughts. Cleanliness is a mark of self-respect. Ancient travelers like Megasthenes in the 4th century, Phocion in the 5th century AD, and Xuanzang in the 7th century AD, when they came to India, have written about the efficient administrative systems with planned settlements and good urban infrastructure. What has gone wrong with us now? Why can't we keep our environment free of filth? The Prime Minister's call to honor the memory of Mahatma Gandhi on his 150th birth anniversary by making India a clean country by 2019 is commendable, but it can be achieved only if each Indian converts this into a national mission. Every road, every path, every office, every home, every hut, every river, every stream, every particle in the air around us can be kept clean if we cared just a little. We must nurture nature so that nature continues to nurture us. My fellow citizens, though an ancient civilization, India is a modern nation with modern dreams. Intolerance and violence is a betrayal of the letter and spirit of democracy. Those who believe in the poison drip of inflammatory provocation do not understand India's values or even its present political impulses. Indians know that progress, economic or social, is difficult without peace. This may be the appropriate moment to recall the great Shivaji's letter to Aurangzeb when the latter imposed jizya. Shivaji told the emperor that Shah Jahan, Jahangir, and Akbar could also have levied this tax, but they did not give place to bigotry in their hearts, as they considered all men, high and low, created by God to be examples of the nature of diverse creeds and temperaments. This 17th century epistle of Shivaji carries a message which is universal. It must become a living testament that guides our behavior today. We can least afford to forget this message at a time when an increasingly turbulent international environment has sparked off rising dangers in our region and beyond, some clearly visible and some crawling out of the debris of unprecedented turmoil. Across parts of Asia and Africa, attempts are being made by radical militias to redraw the maps of nations to create a geography for theocratic ideology. India will feel the heat of blowback, particularly as it represents the values that reject extremism in all its manifestations. India is a beacon of democracy, equilibrium, inter and intra-faith harmony. We must defend our secular fabric with vigor. Our security and foreign policies must combine the steel of strength with the velvet of diplomacy, even as we persuade the like-minded as well as the hesitant to recognize the substantial dangers that breed with indifference. Fellow citizens, our Constitution is a consequence of our democratic culture, which reflects our ancient values. It pains me to note that this great national asset is becoming increasingly vulnerable to rash excesses. Our right to freedom continues to flourish, and may that always be the case. But what about our sense of duty to the people? I sometimes wonder, has our democracy become too noisy? Have we lost the art of contemplation and calm thinking? Is it not the time to restore the grandeur and glory of our institutions that have sustained and nourished our beautiful democracy? Should not Parliament again become the great hall of somber thought and well-informed debate? Should not our courts of law become temples of justice? This calls for collective action by all the stakeholders. A nation is very young at 68. India has the will, energy, intellect, values, and unity to claim the 21st century. The vision to win the battle of freedom from poverty is set. The journey will seem formidable only to those without conviction. As an old saying goes, Siddhir Bhavati Karamja, which means success is born of action. Now is the time for action. Jai Hind! Jai Hind! Jai Hind! Jai Hind! Jai Hind! Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. As I try to do on this occasion every year, I just want to say a few words from my side. This is my third Independence Day flag hoisting in Egypt. It's a special privilege to be the representative of a great nation in a great nation like Egypt. I want to share with you some of the things that we are trying to do and also introduce to you some of the members of our wonderful team at the embassy who are the ones who put in all the hard work for us, for India, and for you. 2 years back, soon after I came here, I said that we want to try and raise India's profile in Egypt. Everybody talks about the friendship between President Nasser and Prime Minister Nehru, but what about today? And one of the things that we said we would try to do is build an annual cultural festival. We had the festival in 2013, April, called India by the Nile. We had a really successful festival this year in April, India by the Nile Part 2. And we are already ready, making preparations for India by the Nile for next year. The venues have been booked, the programming is more or less in place, and we will continue with our commitment to make it an annual festival. What it has done, thanks to the quality of the performances, the professionalism of the company that we work with, and the efforts of our colleagues, particularly Abu and his team in the press office, is that it has raised the profile of India. It is not unusual for me to meet ministers and say, oh, yours is a very active embassy. And I think that's a tribute to all of us. All of us can take pride in the fact that we have a mission in which is catching the attention of many Egyptians, whether it is ministers or ordinary people. On the economic side, our trade is about $5.5 billion. And I'm very proud to say that even at a time when Egypt was going through a downturn over the last 2 years, our relationship has continued to grow. And so the data that we saw earlier this year has pitched us into the top 10 trading partners of Egypt, which is something that we will continue to build upon. The 50 or so Indian companies that we have in Egypt and the companies that are run very successfully by our friends from the Bohra community are the bedrock of our economic relationship. And to service them better, we created an India Business Forum, which meets every quarter in the embassy. One of our members of the Indian community provides secretarial services to the forum under the auspices of the Confederation of Indian Industry. And I'm very pleased to report that in the last few months, we were able to create very useful interactions between the members of the Indian business community, and first with the Minister of Investment, then with the Minister of Trade and Industry, so that they could hear firsthand about issues being faced by the business community and to tackle them. This was also the theme of my meeting with the Honorable Prime Minister, Engineer Ibrahim Mehlab, when I met him about 10 days back. And again, the focus was really on what can we do together to further our economic relationship, because it's not enough to talk about close government-to-government relations unless we can also talk about people-to-people relations and the economic relationship. In the next couple of weeks, we'll have a delegation from our Civil Aviation Ministry for talks here, which I hope are going to lead to more and direct air connectivity. And we are already aware from our friends in Egypt here that they plan to start a direct Delhi-Cairo flight in October, which should be very helpful to, again, connecting us. We are expecting a fairly senior delegation from Egypt to go to India next month to discuss some very new areas of cooperation like remote sensing and space and so on. And again, it's something that we are trying to focus on, because these are areas that not only benefit people but can sometimes catch the imagination. Our defense advisor has been working tirelessly on defense issues. And again, it's something that we attach a great importance. We know that our friends in Egypt are very keen for a stronger relationship, and it's something that we expect to build upon. On our consular side, we are introducing biometrics in keeping with the international practice. It will initially mean a little bit of convenience, but over a longer term, I'm sure we will all benefit from the enhanced security that it provides. I know that we've got feedback from many of you from time to time and from our Egyptian friends that the location of our visa office and our cultural center perhaps is not commensurate with the standing of India in this country, and that downtown Cairo is perhaps not the glamorous location that it used to be in the 50s or 60s. And we are responding to that, and before the end of the year, we hope that we will have our new cultural center and a visa office and our press office right here in Zamalek in the HSBC building. Work for that is starting fairly soon. And I hope that will be a convenience. It has parking around, and it has much better facilities, which I hope will be useful. One of the areas that we work on, which is not well known, is that the embassy here is also accredited to the League of Arab States, which is a 22-member grouping. And last December, when Secretary General Nabil Al-Arabi went to India, he signed a very ambitious MOU. And so in implementation of that, for the first time now, we'll have a serious India-Arab engagement beyond an India-Egypt engagement taking place. In fact, about 10 days from now, a group of Arab journalists from about 16 countries are going to be in Delhi on August 24 to 27 for a media symposium. Later, we'll have an Indo-Arab Cultural Festival in Algeria. We're going to have in November a very major Indo-Arab Business Partnership Conference in Delhi. And that will be followed by a senior officials meeting where senior officials from all the Arab countries are coming to Delhi for a dialogue. So that's again one of the things that we from this embassy are working on, and I thought I must share with you. And finally, it is my privilege, my pleasure to introduce our new Deputy Chief of Mission, Vishwas Sapkal, and his wife here. They've come from St. Petersburg. Vishwas was the very dynamic Consul General in St. Petersburg and comes here with a great reputation and with some very active shoes to fill, which his predecessor Wana left behind. So we hope that, again, like Wana, he continues to receive your friendship and affection. Mr. Babu, our tireless head of the consular wing, who not only provides passport and visa services to all of you, but also increasingly looks after commercial issues. Dipankar, Ramesh. Ramesh is also our Second Secretary Commercial, and in addition to his many portfolios, he also handles the ITEC program, the Indian Technical and Economic Cooperation Program, under which about 100 Egyptians go to India for training every year. I must recognize Abu, who's somewhere here, as our press officer, Anil, who's our head of Chancery and keeps the administration in place, the defense advisor, of course. I know I can't name everybody, but I must recognize Gulshan, who anchors my office in the long hours that I sometimes end up keeping. We have the best possible team and supported by a phenomenal group of ladies. Should I mention Mani? Who we often joke that the Ministry of External Affairs has a policy of buy one, get one free. So they pay for my salary and they get her services for free. But that is also true for all the other ladies from the embassy. And I know I haven't done this before, but ladies, thank you for all the time and effort that you put into the India by the Nile Festival, on those saris, on the exhibitions and everything else. Thank you so much. And now please join us for some refreshments and a cup of tea. Thank you for being here.